everybody. Can you all see and hear me?
Yes, sir.
Oh, that's great. Fantastic. In fact, I don't know where to start and how to start because I'm afraid I'm addressing people who are far more qualified than I am and far more experienced than I am in the teaching field. And in fact, I come from London. There are some plus points in saying that one is from London, but unfortunately, I don't belong to that category of plus points anymore because I'm a dialysis patient, full-time hospitalized. I was in a deep sleep after my dialysis when my friend Jason sir woke me up nearly an hour or so ago and prompted me to address you guys. So I was collecting myself so that I would be able to speak to you. There are quite a few things that I want to bring to your attention for your personal empowerment and benefit. The things that I'm trying to speak to you today, you may already know. There may be a couple of things that are new to you. I'll continue for the next 45 minutes, but that too very slowly. The main reason being my physical, personal inability, for which I apologize. Let me start with a simple, a very, very small incident. Nearly 10 years ago, one of my nieces came to this country to do her MSc in international management, in business management from one of the top universities, Hertfordshire University in this country, and she was living with me. She is a product of the Marivanius College, and before that, she came from one of the best schools in Trivandrum, and her English was very good. And she was commended by Rahul Gandhi when Rahul Gandhi visited the Marivanius College many years ago. A very, very outstanding personality. She was very confident with everything, and she had a very high score for her IELTS. When she submitted her purpose for the first semester, she failed. She had no clue why she failed. She went to her tutor. I said, "Sir, guys." The guy told her, "Okay, you go and sit with your answer sheet once again, and see where you went wrong." Okay. With a lot of tears and screaming, she came to me. And I went through her answer sheet. And I pointed out so many problems, I should say, in it. And I told her, "You put a correction on such areas." She was rather shocked. She told me, "Uncle, I don't see anything wrong in these things." I said, "Well, that's a problem. Because you studied English from the classrooms. English from the classrooms. But unfortunately, there's a remarkable difference between the English language as it is being used in classrooms, especially in Oriental areas or in foreign countries, and the English language being used in the academic circles, in the educated circles, and in the high employment circles in the world around. But unfortunately, this particular problem has not been addressed in our schools and colleges or in our classrooms where we teach or where the students study. So what do? They learn English from the classrooms and they go out and use it. when it is in their own country, it is fantastic. But unfortunately, if it happens to be in academic circles, high academic circles, outside the country, especially in the UK, I don't know what it is like in the United States. But if it is in the UK, many of our English usages are not, correct or acceptable. They would rather call it un-English. They would rather call it un-English. That's not the right phrase. They call it, oh, that's un-English. In my niece's case, what I did was I underlined so many of her usage mistakes, and I gave her a correction. The same paper resubmitted, she came on top. So keep that information in mind. Today, I promised that I will be focusing on a topic named verbal communication, but that is so extensive, and I won't be able to do justice to it in 45 minutes or 1 hour or 45 hours. So I am focusing on only one area of the topics, of the entire topics. And my focus today is classroom English and real English. Classroom English and real English. Knowingly or unknowingly, we think that in classrooms we teach the students the right or the appropriate or the best English. Well, keep that understanding as such. I don't want you to change it. But at the same time, I want you to make some additions or corrections upon it so that our classroom English could be clubbed with the real English. There is something like real English. Whenever I speak about the terminology real English, which I studied in Lingaphone Institute, London, and many of my colleagues from other parts of the world had not had that privilege, I should take it. Please don't forgive me if you feel offended, of being a student of Lingaphone Institute, where they dissect every word, every syllable, every accent, every grammaticality of the language. And they teach you how to use it correctly. Many of my colleagues who didn't have that privilege are rather shocked when I say real English. So my today's focus is, today I'm trying to give you, first of all, some idea, some general idea of what is happening with the English, the world of the English language today. And secondly, I'll focus on a few areas where if you can make some improvement upon, if at all you need it. I don't think you are badly in need of it, but if at all you need it. And then I'll give you some guidelines that will help you improve upon your language proclivities. Okay, the first thing I want to do is I want to introduce to you one book which I didn't write. I don't have that skills. I think at least some of you can see this. Okay, this is known as the Longman Dictionary of Contemporary English. Longman Dictionary of Contemporary English. Don't say dictionary, dictionary. For some reason or other, in our academic circles, the most popular dictionary is the Oxford English Dictionary. I don't have any problem with the Oxford English Dictionary. I should know that anyway. Well, the Oxford English Dictionary gives you the meaning of the word, and gives you an example or two, or a couple of examples in which that word is to be used. However, we being foreign speakers of the language, we can't be complacent with what the Oxford English Dictionary can give us. I showed you just now another dictionary, the Longman Dictionary of Contemporary English. The speciality of it is, number one, it gives you the Englishes in the world, all the different Englishes in the world, about which I'm going to tell you something in a minute. And secondly, what are the precautions to be maintained when you use a word or when you form a sentence? What are the precautions to be maintained when you use a word, when you use a sentence? And then also, it gives you the different pronunciations of the word. For example, the British pronunciation of the word, or they call it the English pronunciation of the word, and the American pronunciation of the word. So I was telling you, in Longman's Dictionary of Contemporary English, you get all these things. And also, the things that I'm going to tell you today, which are fundamental and very important in our own better English usages. This particular dictionary will help you a lot. I should say this is the one book that you can completely rely upon. Though a language with very many international accolades, English is a language with many anomalies. English is a language with many anomalies. That is a basic understanding with which we should start. Where are all these anomalies? Look at it. It's reflected in its spelling, in its pronunciation, in its vocabulary, and in its grammar. Spelling, pronunciation, vocabulary, and grammar. In all the four areas, English is a language of many anomalies. As long as we don't realize the fact that it's a language of multiple analogies, so anomalies, we might be in the dark when it comes to the question of using the proper or the right or the correct English. So what are these anomalies? That's the first thing that I'm going to look at. If I'm not clear, or if I don't communicate to you well enough, you can tell me, keep me informed. The first thing, North Italian in spelling. The many centuries ago, when the English language was in its infancy in this country, in the UK, it had a spelling system that was completely phonetic. But unfortunately, it's not anymore. The spelling that is A, B, C, D is not English spelling. It is North Italian. So what happens? There is a massive incomparability or incompatibility between the spelling and pronunciation. What do we do? Well, I'm from India. I had all my education in India and my higher studies in this country. In the classrooms, if we teach the students first the spelling, A, B, C, D. That's where we start. As the person who introduced me told that I'm an international teacher of the Hebrew language. I don't teach the Hebrew language with the Hebrew spelling or the Hebrew alphabet. That's a wrong way of teaching. In teaching, we say LSRW, which you know. Listen, speak, read, write. Listen, speak, read, write. That's the right method of teaching a language. LSRW. Is that the method used in this country? Yes. I don't mean that the teaching method in the school syllabus in this country are the best in the world. No, I don't say that, but the methods are the best in the world. What's it like? They don't teach the students the A, B, C, D, the alphabet in the first class, in the first standard, nor even in the second standard. They don't teach the alphabet. No. They go on speaking, and they expect the students to imitate them. Just to imitate. They don't teach the spelling first. And through speaking to the students, they make the students understand the phonology of the language or the phonetic build-up of the language, the phonology. Because in the English language, well, as many of you know, there are 44 sounds and 26 letters. The problem, we never learn, most of us, I don't know what's happening now, most of us, we never learn the 44 sounds, but we teach the 26 letters. So the difference between the 44 sounds and the 26 letters, when these are not addressed, you know what happens? There's always a problem between the spelling and pronunciation. Always a problem between the spelling and pronunciation. Now you would ask me, why should I be so serious about it? I am a bit concerned about it. I remember an incident a few years ago when a nurse came to me and told me that she lost her job and I should represent her case in the court. Those days I was a legal consultant and I used to take up nurses' cases to the court. So this Malayali nurse, she wanted to serve food to the elderly people in the nursing home where she was working. And so she had a menu in her hand with which she went to an elderly lady and asked her, "Madam, what do you want?" And the lady asked, "What do you have?" She read from the menu, "Lesagni, Lesagni." The lady was upset. She said, "What?" And then she read the spelling. Okay, the Italian dish is lasagna. Lasagna, which this our very innocent Malayali nurse pronounced as lasagni. The elderly lady was upset. She called the management. She made a big complaint and made a mess of everything. And in the end, the management suspended the person, the nurse, and told her, "You better go and study English language properly and come back. Otherwise, you are upsetting our people here," the patients here. So the problem is, if this nurse had known that English language is not to be pronounced as it is written, she would have at least gone to some of her British colleagues and asked them, "Look, this particular word, could you please tell me how to read it or how to pronounce it?" The English, as I'm telling you, to start with, is North Italian in spelling and Norman French in vocabulary. Norman French in vocabulary. I should say almost 80% or 75 to 80% of the basic English words are still Norman. Norman French, not the other French, Norman French. Even our curry and flan, and our uncle and auntie, our roast and toast, are all French. So, does the word have a French origin? If it has a French origin, you must be very careful about how you're going to use it. So, and the third thing is Greek in grammar. So I told you North Italian in spelling, French in vocabulary, and Greek in grammar, and unphonetic in pronunciation. Unphonetic in pronunciation. This is the basic understanding we must keep with us when we use the English language. And then, because these anomalies are not very well addressed in our classrooms where they must be addressed, what happens? We teach students a certain type of language and give them a certain sort of language accuracy, which from our examinations point of view are absolutely correct. Yes, perfect, there is no doubt about it. But when it comes outside of the classroom, and especially in the academic circles, and especially in the high employment circles, And more especially, when you're facing a telephonic interview, or an employment interview, face-to-face interview, these are all the things they mark. These are all the things they mark. And they even look at your lips, and see how the lip movements are, especially when you articulate a labiodental sound or a bilabial sound or a fricatives. So when a child pronounces a fricative, is to tell the child, well, that is a fricative. That is a labiodental. That is a bilabial. If you should say that is bilabial, that is labiodental, that is fricative, you must know it. If suppose you don't know it, then you won't be able to teach them. Okay, so I was telling you how to keep your eye on the pronunciation, which I'll be a bit more I'll be focusing a bit more in a few minutes time. So I was telling you of the anomalies. Look, there are Englishes. That's what I was telling you about. There are Englishes. It's a language that began in the United Kingdom. So you know that without me telling you. You already know it. And then it spread to different parts of the world, especially because of the during the colonial period, colonization. And George Bernard Shaw, a great stalwart of the English language, once commended that Great Britain and the United States are two nations divided by the same language. Two nations divided by the same language. Of course, we have what is called American English, which we call American English, which Americans call only American. They don't say we speak English. Most of them would rather say we speak American. That's their way. And then there's Canadian English and Australian English. And in Singapore, some people would even call it Simglish instead of calling English. And we have even Indian English. Yes. Of all these, what is it that I'm going to focus on? The one thing that I'm focused on is the British English, which many years ago, or I should say during the second part of the 20th century, they developed as Queen's English, Queen's English, which was the standard of accuracy in the English language, Queen's English, which later on developed into what is called RP, or received pronunciation. And then, which yet again developed into what is called the British Academic English, or they call it the British Standard. They call it the British Standard, which is not very popular across the UK, but it is very much sought after in all the academic circles. I'll tell you one thing of the development of the language. The first English dictionary was written by Dr. Samuel Johnson in 1755. When that dictionary came out, it had 40,000 words. Its vocabulary was 40,000 words. But today, the Oxford English Dictionary carries more than 100,000 words. Look at the way in which, the pace in which the language has been growing. So keep that in mind. So for example, many things that we read in our textbooks and we explain to the students are not exactly the way in which it is being used in the world today. Let me give you an example. When Dr. Johnson published this dictionary, he wrote a preface to it. And in the preface he wrote, my dictionary should stand the text of the great as well as the vulgar. That means great people should read my dictionary, and the vulgar people also should read my dictionary. They also should test my dictionary. The vulgar people. What do you mean? What do we mean when we read vulgar? Okay, whatever it may be, I tell you. In Johnson's English, and even during the early half of the 20th century English, the word vulgar meant good, commendable, popular, very good. So vulgarity means popularity. Vulgate means popular, common. Latin vulgate means the common Latin. Okay, today, can I tell a young lady, oh, honey, you are a person with great vulgarity. You look very vulgar. Well, you can imagine what will happen. Look in the 15th century. Bloody was by Our Lady. By Our Lady means by Virgin Mary. A pious Christian would always say, oh, bloody. Oh, bloody means, oh, by Our Lady. But today, if I call somebody bloody, and then I explain, they give the reason that I meant it in the 15th century English, their hand won't be waiting until my explanation comes out before it reaches my cheek. Look, the language has been changing. In classroom English, we get the English from the textbooks, and we go to a dictionary, and that dictionary itself could be obsolete. Many people still use the old Chambers dictionary, that very, very obsolete stuff, which they look into with great diligence. And they stumble on the meaning of a word and the usage of it. Yes, that's how it was used once upon a time. But unfortunately, the sky speed with which the language is growing today has not been explained by a dictionary that is already obsolete. That's why I already gave you the reference of another dictionary. So the pace at which the language is growing. I told you about the Queen's English and the received pronunciation and the British Standard English. Okay. And then tantamount to it is another English, which is called IIE. IIE means Internationally Intelligible English. Internationally Intelligible English. Well, I can tell you, there are some narrow differences between this British Standard English and the Internationally Intelligible English. I can give you one example. That dictionary will give you more. I can give you one example. What is it? You know, the word zero. Zero. Zero is a word, as such, seldom used in British circles. Instead, what do they say? Oh, oh, oh. For example, my telephone number starts with 0208. But if I give my telephone number to somebody in the UK, I would say 0208. 0208. Okay. At the same time, if I give the same to my Indian listener, they may not catch it a bit. So to them, I say 0208. Today, most of the students, not most, all people who come to the UK, either as a student or as a key worker, say as a doctor or as a nurse or as a computer professional, first they have to face a telephonic interview from this part of the world. You know why they do it? Because they want to know how well does this particular person speak the British English. If they say, could you please tell me your date of birth? And if there is a 0, 0, 0, is a 0. Not 0, 0. That word itself, that sound is not 0, zero, zero, zero. I have no time to focus on diphthongs in the language. If I could explain it much further. Okay, so, but suppose you're facing the same interview from Canada, or from the USA, or from Australia, or from New Zealand. You can say zero is well accepted. There's no problem. But at the same time, if it is British standard and it is a 0, 0, 0, they feel offended. They should not feel offended. But they would rather not consider. Instead, you have to say, oh. And then there are some particular terminologies or particular ways in which the English language has been used in the UK, especially in the academic circles, which unfortunately a foreign speaker of the language may not be very familiar with. And that's why they don't teach the students the same thing in the classroom. And the students come out with their usual English. Australia. How do I expound it? Okay, let's create a scenario. A student or a prospective employee from this country has submitted his or her application to an agency in the UK, for which they call them for an interview, telephonic interview. That's essential anyway. In the telephonic interview, do you know what would be the first question they would ask? Interesting enough. The first question they would be asking is, how do you do? Well, how do you do is not a question. It's not a question. And because it is not a question, it has no answer. But most of the Indian students or employees, prospective employees, they take it for a question. And they say, fine, thanks. Fine, thanks. Thank you, madam, very much. I'm very good. Okay. But they didn't ask you a question. Then what is how do you do? It doesn't mean anything. It's not a question. It's not a piece of inquiry. It is nothing. Therefore, it doesn't require an answer. So what should you do then? Is somebody asking, how do you do? You say, how do you do? 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 Look, then the other person understands that you know British Standard English. But it is a fine science that's different. Okay. And then comes the next thing. What is the first question that we would ask somebody when we meet them? Most of the time, we ask, how are you? Well, I'll bring you to an understanding that how are you? That question, how are you? You must know two things about that question. The first thing is, you can ask that question to a person only when you know him or her well enough. That question is to a person only when you know him or her well enough. And the second scenario, when you are making an inquiry about that person's health condition. That person's health condition. Otherwise, you better not ask how are you. But when you have known the person well enough, you can ask how are you. You can ask how are you. Well, then comes the, well, my doctor always asks me, how are you? Because my doctor is concerned about my health. About my health. So, how are you? When it comes, how are you? What is the answer? What is the answer? Well, there can be many answers. If we are okay, we can say, I'm very good, sir or madam, thank you, and you. Suppose we are not very good. Then we say, not bad. We don't say bad. We say, not bad. Thank you. And suppose we are really miserable. We are really miserable. As I was today morning when my friend Jason sir woke me up from my deep sleeping bed. If he had asked me, Achaya, how are you? What would have been, he didn't ask me that. What would have been my answer? My answer could have been, well, it could be worse. It could be worse. It could be worse. If we are in a very miserable, bad condition, then the answer we give is, it could be worse. It could be worse. Okay. And now comes another question with it. We usually ask, how are you? In every context. For example, we got a new English teacher. That itself is a tricky terminology. Many years I was a teacher of English, but I have never been an English teacher and I will never become an English teacher. I think you got the difference between the two. A person who teaches English is a teacher of English. Is a teacher of English, not necessarily an English teacher. English teacher means a person, a lady or gentleman who is English first. And that person must be teaching chemistry or philosophy or mathematics or psychology or history or anything, but that person is English, so he or she addresses himself or herself as, I'm an English teacher. That doesn't mean they teach the English language. If they teach the English language, they would better say, I'm a teacher of English. I'm a teacher of English. So there is a difference between English teacher and teacher of English. Yes. So suppose we got a new teacher and one student would ask the other or one person would ask, how is the new English teacher? How is your English teacher? What does it mean? What does it mean? It specifically means her health condition, her or his health condition, her condition. In that case, how is your new school? How is the new school? Oh, the new school is wonderful or wonderful, whatever it may be. But let me tell you, the right way of asking that question is, what is your new school like? What is it like? What's the teacher like? What's my teaching like? What's her performance like? Don't say, how is her performance? What's her performance like? Because I'm hospitalized, every now and then the nurses come to measure my blood pressure. I don't ask her, how is my blood pressure? No. Or what is the blood pressure count? So what is it like? What is it like? That's the right way. Did you get me? So when you want to know the characteristic or the general nature, or rather the appearance or the behavioral pattern of somebody or something, you better ask the question, what is it like? Don't ask, how is the weather today? No. That means whether the weather is sick or not. Who knows? God in heaven knows. But we had better say, what is the weather like? What is the weather like? Okay. The last thing I was telling you about, okay, the things that we ask in the real life situations. When telephonic interviews are being done and the students whom we reproduce the language that we inbuilt in them, and if it is not up to the mark, they lose the great chances that are ahead of them, that would be waiting for them. What are the areas in which we should focus on when we come to the question of accuracy? I'm going to give you some broad divisions. I know it's a very, very monotonous topic, which you never liked even during your school days. However, let me try to make it as palatable as possible. As palatable as possible. Look, if we are to give a negative answer, how do we start a negative answer? Mostly, in our polished English, we say sorry. We say sorry, sorry. That's how we start with it. But in the British English or the standard English, we have something else to add upon. And what is that something else? Afraid, afraid, afraid. But we can be very careful where we use it. Only in the academic circles. I once faced a problem. Somebody from the United States stole my article and he published it in his name, which I was very offended when I heard about. I gave him a very tough email in a rather hurting way. And he was shocked. I told him, I'm going to drag you to the court because you stole my article and you published it in your name. And then he made an apology. I found that I really hurt him. Then I gave him a nice letter in which I told him, I'm afraid I hurt him. I'm afraid I hurt him. You know, what is the meaning of the term afraid? Afraid means I am really sorry. It doesn't mean I fear anything. But this guy, he gave me an answer saying, oh, Babu John, sir, don't be afraid. Don't fear anything. Fear is a very negative thing. Blah, 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 like that. He gave me a long letter on the negative aspects of the word afraid. Did he mean I was afraid of him? No, that's not the meaning. Sorry, I'm afraid. Whenever we give a negative answer, we face a negative situation, we should better say, I'm afraid. I'm afraid. There are ever so many such usages. I gave you only one or two. If somebody give you a thanks, you're welcome. No mention, please. That's okay. And the best answer is my pleasure. My pleasure. Somebody gives you thanks. You say, my pleasure. My pleasure. If you're not familiar with this terminology, my pleasure so far, please pass it over to the students tomorrow itself and tell them this is how you should give the best answer. And suppose you are giving something to somebody, handing something to somebody over, maybe a cup of tea or a sheet of paper or a textbook. What would you say when you pass it over to them? The best terminologies are, here you are, here you are. In a formal English, informal communication, and if it is an informal, there you go, there you go. But unfortunately, we don't use any of these things. We don't say here you are or there you go when you pass something to somebody. Okay, I can go on speaking on these things for many, many hours, but I have to do justice to my time and to your time also. I'm going to constrain myself to a few areas of focus. The first thing is a broad view of the language vocabulary. The broad view of the language vocabulary. You know, the English language has two types of words. The first is the content or the non-grammatical words, and the second is the non-content or the grammatical words. Content words and non-content words. Keep that in mind. The content words are non-grammatical words, and the non-content words are the grammatical words. Which are the content words or meaningful words? They are nouns, verbs, adjectives, and adverbs. Nouns, verbs, adjectives, and adverbs. Nouns, verbs, adjectives, and adverbs. Okay, these are the content words. And the second thing is the grammatical words, non-content words. They don't have specific meanings. The articles, the prepositions, the conjunctions, the determiners. Okay, these are the grammatical words. The first difference to notice, every non-content words or every grammatical word has different pronunciations according to the context. For example, I say am, am. Three ways in which they are to be pronounced. If it is the main verb, I am teaching. I am a teacher. Am. Then, if it is a question, the same word becomes am. Am I? Am I? Am I? Am I? And the same word, if it is only, what do you call it? Oh, I forgot all the terminologies. Auxiliary. It's only an auxiliary. I'm okay. I'm okay. I'm fine. Look at it. We teach the students. We don't manufacture airplanes or ships in our classrooms, but we mold minds that will manufacture these things. They're going to be out in the industry. They're going to be world outside. They have to be in academic circles, in the outer world. They have to confront great scholars, or I should say stalwarts of the language, where unfortunately accuracy in English language is still a matter of serious concern. Accuracy in English language is still a matter of serious concern. So I told you about the difference between grammatical and non-grammatical words. When it comes to non-grammatical words, the way in which you pronounce is very, 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 very important. Look at the single letter R, where they are pronounced, where it is not pronounced, where it is pronounced in different ways, and where it is pronounced when it is not written. The letter R is not in the context, but you have to pronounce it. So, for example, when a word ends with one vowel, and the next word starts with another vowel, a word ends with one vowel, and the next word starts with another vowel. In between these two vowels, we must pronounce the word R, though it is not in writing. For example, we say soda, soda, and water, soda and water, soda and water. In British Standard English, you must say soda and water, soda and water, soda and water in British Standard English. Asia and Africa, Asia, and Asia and Africa. In classroom English, we say Asia and Africa. Good. That's how you read it to the students. And after that, you'd say, look, because one word ends with a vowel, and the next word starts with the same vowel or another vowel. In British Standard English, when you pronounce it, when you speak it, you should say soda and water, soda and water. Suppose they don't do it. In India or in our classroom, the sky doesn't fall down on them. The sky doesn't fall down on them. But unfortunately, when they come out of the classroom and they face, as I told you, a serious interview for a job abroad, and if the other person, if the interviewer is a person with a strong British English or internationally intelligible English, then our students' performance won't be appreciated. Okay, I'll come to that in a few minutes' time, if time allows, and let me go back. I told you the broad difference, two broad categories, content words and non-content words. In content words, when you use the dictionary next time, you should look up the word carefully and see what it is written like. Say you are using a noun. You are using a noun. The first thing you should look up is what sort of noun it is. What sort of noun it is. You should certainly look it up in the dictionary, as I told you, in the Longman dictionary, and see whether it is a countable noun or whether it is an uncountable noun. I'm not going to explain to you the difference between countable and uncountable because you are already teachers. You already know it. But I'm going to tell you two things about it. The first thing is, if it is an uncountable noun, if it is an uncountable noun, it doesn't have a plural formation. It doesn't have a plural formation. And secondly, it does not have a or an with it. It cannot have a or an with it. So whenever you look up a word and see whether it is countable or uncountable, if it is uncountable, it is written U in the bracket. Countable, C in the bracket. Then what do you understand? It's countable or uncountable. Say, for example, let me give you a word. For example, accommodation. Accommodation. Accommodation is an uncountable noun. So what does it mean? It means we don't say an accommodation. We don't say accommodations either. We don't say accommodations either. Suppose plenty of accommodation, then we have to use it in the countable. In the countable, we use many pieces of living. Many places, not pieces, many places of living. We have many places of living here. Don't say we have lots of accommodations or we have an accommodation, but accommodation, baggage, bread, chewing gum. Look, equipment, equipment. Don't say equipment, equipment, equipment. It's commonly heard in classroom English, people saying equipments, equipments. No, it is not equipments, equipment, equipment. Or if you want to use it in the countable, you say a piece of tool, a piece of tool. Furniture, you know, information, information. I gave them lot of information, lot of information. Absolutely incorrect. Lots and lots of information, lots and lots of information. Knowledge, lightning, luck, baggage, money, news, permission. Permission, not permissions are given. Permission is given. Don't ever say permissions. And you know the word poetry. Poetry, not poetry, poetry. Poetry, progresses, progress. Don't say she made a lot of progresses. She made a lot of progress, not progresses. Publicity, not publicities, publicity. Look at the word research. We can never say researches. No, that word doesn't exist. Research, rubbish, slang, thunder, traffic. Traffic. Don't say, oh, heavy traffic, lots of traffic. Don't say. Lots of vehicle on the road, lots of cars, a very heavy traffic. We never said traffics. Look, and another word to be very carefully used is vocabulary. Don't say vocabularies. No, no, it's only vocabulary. Why? These are all what you call uncountable nouns. So whenever we use a word and we know that is a noun, we be very careful whether it is countable or uncountable. I have to go fast. And the next thing that I want you to focus is on verbs. There are 4 things that you should be mindful about when you use a verb. The first thing is whether that verb is transitive or intransitive. Transitive or intransitive, you know what it is. the one that can be followed by an object, that cannot be followed by an object, whether it is transitive or intransitive. So transitive verbs and intransitive verbs, we should be very careful about. Why? Because if transitive verbs are used intransitively and intransitive verbs are used transitively, there is a problem. Again, the word that you are using, if it is a verb, look it up and see whether it has a T or an I or birth. If I tell you the sentence, 2 bogies of the trains derailed yesterday. 2 bogies of a train derailed yesterday. 2 bogies of a train derailed yesterday. On the surface level, you may not think that there is anything wrong in it, but that's grammatically incorrect, because derailed is a transitive verb. Derailed is a transitive verb. What does it mean? 2 bogies of the train went and they derailed something. What did they derail? Yesterday. What did they derail? They derailed yesterday. No, that's incorrect. If the bogie is derailed, then you should use it in the passive voice. 2 bogies of the train were derailed yesterday. Were derailed yesterday. Then it becomes correct. So be careful whether it is transitive or intransitive. There are certain verbs that is always transitive and some others always intransitive. If it is always transitive, make sure that there is a direct object. Okay. And the next 2 things that I want to tell you about, keep that in mind. And the next 2 things that I want to tell you about are the progressive and non-progressive aspects. Progressive and non-progressive aspects. What do we mean by progressive and non-progressive aspects? So that means we say continuous. Continuous. That means an auxiliary plus a verb plus ing is continuous or progressive. There are certain verbs that are pertaining to a particular state of mind. Pertaining to a particular state of mind. If the action is pertaining to a particular state of mind, it does not have a progressive aspect. For example, our most famous word, understand. Understand. Unfortunately, even today, many teachers ask their students the question, are you understanding? And the student would say, yes, I am understanding. Or sorry, I am not understanding. Look, it is something, understanding is a process pertaining to a state of mind, and therefore, you're not supposed to ask the question, understanding. Do you understand? Yes, I understand. Sorry, I'm afraid I don't understand. Yes, I understand, and I don't understand. But understanding is incorrect. So those are called perspective verbs. Try to look them up in a grammar book, a good grammar book, or somewhere else, or even in the dictionary I told you about, and see which are all the perspective verbs. If it is a perspective verb, it does not have a continuous aspect or a progressive aspect. And then I think my time is running out. And then you must be careful about the special usage of verbs. For some reason, English language has its own way of using some words. I remember many of my school teachers telling it is not permitted in the class. It is not allowed here. It is not allowed. It is not permitted. How many times we are tempted to say it is not permitted or it is not allowed? We don't see anything wrong in it. Look at it. It, it. It's an impersonal pronoun. It cannot be used with the 2 verbs, allow and permit. allow and permit. Look at the difference. It is not allowed to speak in the classrooms, or it is not allowed to misbehave in the classroom. That means it does not have the permission. It, that person named it, does not have the permission. The students are not allowed means you are not allowed to misbehave. Students are not allowed to misbehave. Children are not allowed to misbehave. Participants are not allowed to misbehave. Parents are not allowed to misbehave. Public are not allowed to misbehave. Or the staff are not allowed to misbehave. Look, you cannot say it. And now, before you use a word, please go to the dictionary again to see what is the correct use of that word. And now the funniest thing that I'm coming to is adjectives and adverbs. Adjectives and adverbs. Look, whenever you are using an adjective or adverb, please look it up in the dictionary and see whether it is an attributive adjective or a predicative adjective. An attributive adjective or a predicative adjective, because the same adjective has different meaning when it moves from one position to another position. When it moves from one position to another position. Let me give you an example. Concerned. The word concerned has two meanings. When you say related to or in connection with, related to or connection with, related to or connection with. If that is what you mean, then it should be where? It should be in the predicative position. That which comes after the noun is predicative, before the noun is attributive. Okay, let's look at it. Person. Please pass this file to the person concerned. Not concerned person. Person concerned. So, department concerned, office concerned, the teacher concerned, the person concerned, the section concerned. Don't ever say the concerned person. What is the meaning of the term concerned person? Concerned person is an attributive adjective. In the attributive position, it means worried. I am the person concerned. I am the person concerned means I am the person who is responsible. I am the concerned person means I am the person who is worried. Take it to the concerned person means take it to the person who is worried about it. Weeping is full of worry. That is the meaning of the word when it is in the attributive position, and related is the meaning of the word when it is in the predicative position. Look, in Kerala, we have so many entrance coaching, and which they call crash course. Crash course. We have entrance crash course and crash entrance course. Do you know the difference between the two? It's very interesting. Do you know what's a crash plane and a plane crash? A plane crash means a plane crashed down. So entrance crash course. Now you got what it is. Entrance crash course. A crash plane is a very speedily running plane. If this program is speedily running, it should be crash entrance course. Not entrance crash course. It should be crash entrance course. The same word, crash, in the attributive position and in the predicative position, it has different meanings. So when it is an adjective or an adverb, see where it is, whether it is in the attributive or in the predicative, because meanings can change. And before I conclude with one more thing, you must be very careful about the stress accent. The stress accent. If the stress accent is not specified, the meaning would be entirely different. Could be entirely different. For example, the same word can be noun or verb depending on where the accent falls. For example, export. It can be noun and verb. As a noun, the stress falls on the first syllable, so export. Export. But if you're sending, export. Export, not export. Export. Demand, demand, demand. Look, object, 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 object. At the same time, the same word, when it is used in the court of law, and the solicitor is objecting to something the other person has told, he doesn't say, I object, Your Honor. I object, Your Honor. I object, object, Your Honor. Object, Your Honor. Object, object. Export, export. Import, import. Look, the same word with a shift of stress, with a shift of stress, you give it an entirely different meaning. INVALID, INVALID. The first meaning of the word is it's not valid. It is not acceptable. The second meaning of the word is physically weak and hence incapable. See, I'm a dialysis patient, always on bed. I seldom come on my table because of my physical inabilities. My wife could say, my husband is rather invalid. Invalid. But that doesn't mean I am invalid. If she says my husband is invalid, I have an invalid husband means I don't give him any value or any importance at all. It doesn't carry any importance in our life. He's an invalid husband, no value. The same word, same spelling, but there is a shift of stress. When the accent is moving from one syllable to another syllable, we get entirely different words. We get an entirely different word or an entirely different meaning. Okay, guys, I have crossed all my limits, but I haven't given you much. There are many, many more items in the store. Don't worry, I'm concluding. Okay, thank you very much.